Breaking news out of North America. Japan's Subaru has just pulled production out of the United States. And here's the twist. Those cars aren't heading to China or Europe. They're being built in Japan, exclusively for Canada. What began as another tariff dispute is now rewriting the map of global manufacturing. A quiet but decisive shift is underway, and Canada may have just become the biggest unexpected winner. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and join our growing community at Maple States, where every story is fact-checked, balanced, and built for Canadians who want the truth behind the headlines. Hit subscribe, tap the bell icon, and be part of our mission to keep independent reporting alive. Your one click helps us grow, and your comment might even get pinned in our next report. Over the past year, Washington's aggressive tariff policies were meant to bring manufacturing back home. But the result has been the opposite. Companies like Subaru are realizing that the United States is no longer the most predictable place to build cars. Higher labor costs, new import duties, and political uncertainty are prompting global automakers to seek alternative locations. For Subaru, the answer was simple: move production of the Outback, once built in Indiana, back to Japan. Avoid the tariffs, avoid the noise, and sell directly to Canada. At first glance, it might look like a quiet business decision, but what it really shows is a changing world order, one where even traditional allies like Japan are recalibrating their supply chains away from the US and toward markets they see as stable. Canada, with its strong consumer base and calmer politics, suddenly looks like a safer bet. Meanwhile, new data from Statistics Canada reveals that inflation ticked up to 2.4% in September. Groceries are driving much of that rise, not because of local shortages, but because Canada still imports most of its vegetables from the US. Spinach, lettuce, onions, all more expensive because of rising American labor costs and cross-border tariffs. It's a reminder that the US economy doesn't just export products, it exports inflation. When American farm wages rise under restrictive immigration policies, those costs cross the border. That's why so many Canadians are quietly changing habits. More people are choosing locally sourced produce, Canadian steel, and now Japanese-built vehicles instead of US-assembled ones. The shift isn't loud or coordinated. It's happening through everyday choices, one purchase at a time. But those choices are beginning to shape an entirely new economic reality. During a recent visit to a Subaru dealership, a salesperson revealed that the company's entire strategy for Canada is changing. Future Outbacks sold north of the border will no longer roll out of an American plant. They'll come straight from Japan. The reason? Uncertainty. Between 25% retaliatory tariffs and fluctuating metal costs, building in the US simply no longer makes financial sense. Subaru's announcement was first reported by Nikkei and confirmed by Canadian outlets. Japan would produce and export directly to Canada to bypass US policy altogether. And Subaru isn't alone. Japan's overall exports grew 4.2% in September, with double-digit gains across Asia and steady growth in Canada and the EU. While US imports from Japan fell, Japanese automakers are still thriving. They've just shifted where they sell. It's the same pattern seen in China's trade data. Chinese exports to the US have dropped nearly 25%. But total exports to the rest of the world remain stable, even increasing. In other words, America's attempt to isolate rivals has only isolated itself. Canada, on the other hand, is doing what global traders do best: adapting. Exports to the US have fallen, yes, but shipments to the United Kingdom, Singapore, and Italy are reaching record highs. Alberta beef recently entered Costco stores in Mexico, taking over shelf space that once belonged to US suppliers. Prime Minister Mark Carney's direct talks with Mexican leaders resulted in new bilateral trade channels that bypass US middlemen entirely. What was once a trilateral system under NAFTA is quietly becoming a web of country-to-country deals built on reliability, not proximity. But not every story is a success. Canada's auto sector, the heart of its industrial base, remains dangerously exposed. When GM halted production of electric vans in Ontario and Stellantis moved a new model to Illinois, it exposed a painful truth. Canada still depends on US demand for nearly all of its vehicles. In 2024, Canada exported roughly $60 billion worth of vehicles to the United States while importing around $90 billion. That imbalance leaves the Canadian industry vulnerable. Once tariffs hit, the US can choke that flow instantly. And yet, that vulnerability also hides strength, because if Canada is the buyer, then Canada has leverage. If Canadians simply stop purchasing US-built cars, the same way they once boycotted American alcohol and tourism, the economic effect would be seismic. The US exports roughly $144 billion in vehicles each year, and nearly two-thirds of that goes to Canada. If those sales collapse, it's not Detroit that wins. It's Ontario, it's Japan, it's Germany, it's every factory outside US borders now racing to fill that demand. We've seen this power before. When Canadians stopped crossing the border for vacations, small US towns near Niagara and Buffalo saw hotels go dark. When consumers turned away from California wines, the impact was immediate. Tariffs may start in Washington, but consequences begin in the wallets of ordinary people. The message from this moment is simple. Global trade doesn't stop. It reroutes. When one nation walls itself off, another steps in. Subaru's quiet shift from Indiana to Japan is a signal to every major manufacturer. The future belongs to those who stay flexible. And right now, Canada is becoming the new bridge between the West and the Pacific. For Canada, the path forward is clear. Encourage Japanese, European, and even Chinese automakers to invest and build here. Expand production in Ontario and Quebec, where labor costs are stable and energy is cleaner. Use this realignment not just to survive the tariff storm, but to lead in it. Because while Washington doubles down on economic isolation, Canada is quietly writing the next chapter of open strategic trade. And if 40 million Canadians continue to buy smart, choosing vehicles built in Canada, Japan, or anywhere but tariffed US plants, then the balance of power will shift faster than any policy can stop it. This isn't about revenge or rivalry, it's about understanding leverage. Canada doesn't need to shout to be heard, it just needs to choose wisely. And maybe that's how a single consumer market can change the course of a continent. If you're new here, subscribe to Maple States for more verified, fact-based updates on North American trade, energy, and politics. Your support helps us continue telling the stories behind the headlines, and your comment might even get pinned in our next report.